The Case of the Missing Marquis, an Enola Holmes Mystery by Nancy Springer. Chapter 1. I would very much like to know why my mother named me Enola, which backwards spells alone. Mum was, or perhaps still is, fond of ciphers, and she must have had something in mind, whether foreboding or a sort of left-handed blessing, or, already, plans, even though my father had not yet passed away. In any event, "You would do very well on your own, Enola," she would tell me nearly every day as I was growing up. Indeed, this was her usual absent-minded farewell, as she went off with sketchbooks, brushes, and watercolors to roam the countryside. And indeed, alone was very much how she left me, when, on the July evening of my 14th birthday, she neglected to return to Ferndale Hall, our home. As I had my celebration anyway with Lane, the butler, and his wife, the cook, the absence of my mother did not at first trouble me. Although cordial enough when we met, Mum and I seldom interfered in one another's concerns. I assumed that some urgent business kept her elsewhere, especially as she had instructed Mrs. Lane to give me a certain parcels at tea time. Mum's gifts to me consisted of a drawing kit, paper, lead pencils, a penknife for sharpening them, and India rubber erasers, all cleverly arranged in a flat wooden box that opened into an easel. A stout book entitled The Meanings of Flowers, including also notes upon the messages conveyed by fans, handkerchiefs, sealing wax, and postage stamps. A much smaller booklet of ciphers. While I could draw only to a limited degree, Mother encouraged the small knack I had. She knew I enjoyed my sketching as I enjoyed reading almost any book, on whatever topic, but as for ciphers, she knew I did not much care for them. Nevertheless, she had made this little book for me with her own hands, as I could plainly see, folded and stitching together pages she had decorated with dainty watercolor flowers. Obviously, she had been at work on this gift for some time. She did not lack thought for me, I told myself, firmly, several times throughout the evening. While I had no idea where Mum might be, I expected she would either come home or send a message during the night. I slept peacefully enough. However, the next morning, Lane shook his head. "No, the lady of the house has not returned. No, there had been no word from her." Outside, grey rain fell, fitting my mood, which grew more and more uneasy. After breakfast, I trotted back downstairs to my bedroom, a pleasant refuge where the wardrobe, washstand, dresser, and so forth were painted white with pink and blue stenciled posies around the edges. Cottage furniture, folk called it. Cheap stuff suitable only for a child, but I liked it. Most days. Not today. I could not have stayed indoors. Indeed, I could not sit down except hastily, to pull galoshes over my boots. I wore shirt and knickerbockers, comfortable clothing that had previously belonged to my older brothers, and over these I threw a waterproof. All rubbery, I thumped downstairs and took an umbrella from the stand in the hallway. Then I exited through the kitchen, telling Mrs. Lane, "I'm going to have a look around." Odd. These were the same words I said nearly every day when I went out, to look for things, though generally I didn't know what. Anything. I would climb trees just to see what might be there. Snail shells with bands of maroon and yellow, nut clusters, birds' nests. And I found a magpie's nest. I would look for things in it, shoe buttons, bits of shiny ribbon, and somebody's lost earring. I would pretend that something of great value was lost, and I was searching. Only this time I was not pretending. Mrs. Lane, too, knew it was different this time. She should have called, "Where's your hat, Miss Enola?" for I never wore one, but she said nothing as she watched me go. Go to have a look around for Mother. I really thought I could find her myself. Once out of sight of the kitchen, I began running back and forth like a beagle, hunting for any sign of Mum. Yesterday morning, as a birthday treat, I had been allowed to lie abed, therefore I had not seen my mother go out. But assuming that she had, as usual, spent some hours drawing studies of flowers and plants, I looked for her first on the grounds of Ferndale. Managing her estate, Mum liked to let growing things alone. I rambled through flower gardens run wild, lawns invaded by gorse and brambles, forests shrouded in grape and ivy vines, and all the while the grey sky wept rain on me. The old collie dog, Reginald, trotted along with me until he grew tired of getting wet, then left to find shelter. Sensible creature. Soaked to my knees, I knew I should do likewise, but I could not. My anxiety had accelerated along with my gait, until now terror drove me like a lash. Terror that my mother lay out there somewhere, hurt or sick, or a fear I could not entirely deny. As Mum was far from young, she might have been struck down by heart failure. She might be, but one could not even think it so boldly. There were other words. Expired, crossed over, passed away, gone to join my father. No, please. One would think that, as mother and I were not close, I should not have minded her disappearance very much, but quite the contrary. I felt dreaded. Perhaps it seemed all my fault if anything had gone badly with her. Always I felt to blame for whatever, for breathing because I had been born indecently, late in mother's life, a scandal, a burden, you see. And always I'd counted upon setting things right after I was grown. Some day, I hoped, somehow, I would make my life a shining light that could lift me out of the shadow of disgrace. And then, you understand, my mother would love me. So she had to be alive, and I must find her. Searching, I crisscrossed forests where generations of squires had hunted hares and goose. I climbed down and up the shelvings, fern-draped rock of the grotto for which the estate was named, a place I loved, but today I did not linger. I continued to the edge of the park, where the woods ended and the farmland began, and I searched onward into the fields, for Mum may very well have gone there, for the sake of the flowers. Being not too far from the city, Ferndale's tenants had taken to farming bluebells and pansies and lilies instead of vegetables, as they could better prosper by delivering these fresh blossoms daily to Covent Garden. Here grew rows of roses, crops of coreopsis, flaming patches of zinnias, and poppies, or for London. Looking on the fields of flowers, I dreamt of a bright city, where every day smiling maids placed fresh bouquets in every chamber of the mansions, where every evening gentlewomen and royal ladies decked and scented themselves, their hair and gowns with anemones and violets. London, where... But today the acres of flowers hung sodden with rain, and my dreams of London lasted only a breath or two, before evaporating like the mist steaming up from the fields. Vast fields, miles of fields. Where was mother? In my dreams, you see, my mum's dreams, not the London ones, I would find her myself. I would be a heroine. She would gaze up at me in gratitude and adoration when I rescued her. But those were dreams, and I was a fool. So far I had searched only a quarter of the estate, much less the farmlands. If Mum lay injured, she'd given up the ghost before I could find her all by myself. Turning, I hurried back to the hall. There, Lane and Mrs. Lane swooped upon me like a pair of turtle doves upon the nest. He plucked sopping coat and umbrella and boots from me. She bustled me towards the kitchen to get warm. While it was not her place to scold me, she made her views plain. A person could have been simple-minded to stay out of the rain for hours on end, she told the big coal-burning stove as she levered one of its lids off. Don't matter whether a person is common or aristocrat. If a person catches a cold, it would kill her. This is the tea kettle she was placing on the stove. Consumption is no respecter for persons or circumstances. To the tea canister. There was no need for me to respond, for she wasn't talking to me. She would not have been permitted to say anything of the sort to me. It's all very well for a person to be of an independent mind without going looking for quinsy or pilarusi or pneumonia or worse. To the teacups. Then she turned to face me in a tone also about-faced. Begging your pardon, Miss Enola, will you take luncheon? Won't you draw your chair closer to the stove? I'll brown like toast if I do. No, I do not require luncheon. Has there been any word of mother? Although I already knew the answer, for Lane or Mrs. Lane would have told me at once if they had heard anything, still I could not help asking. Nothing, miss. She swaddled her hands in her apron as if wrapping a baby. I stood. Then there are some notes. I must write. Miss Enola, there's no fire in the library. Let me bring the things to you here at the table, miss. I felt just as glad not to have to sit up in the great leather chair in that gloomy room. Into the warm kitchen, Mrs. Lane fetched paper imprinted with our family crest, the ink-pot, and the fountain pen from the library desk, along with some blotting paper. Dipping the pen into the ink on the cream-coloured stationery, I wrote a few words to the local constabulary. informing them that my mother seemed to have gone astray and requesting them to kindly organize a search for her. Then I sat thinking, do I really have to? Unfortunately, yes. I could not put it off no longer. More slowly, I wrote another note, one that would soon wing for miles via wire, to be printed out by a teletype machine as Lady Eudora Vernet Holmes, missing since yesterday. Stop, please advise. Stop, Enola Holmes. I directed this wire to Mycroft Holmes of Pall Mall in London, and also the same message to Sherlock Holmes of Baker Street, also in London. My brothers.